Welcome to the Real Connection, the podcast where we talk about all things real estate, building them up, taking them down, selling them, buying them, investing in them, designing them, decorating them. If it has to do with a home, that's us. Today I'm here with my co-host, Sean Santoro.
Hello.
And we are lucky to have as our guest today, Jordan Silvester from the Keller Williams and Verge teams.
Yeah.
Nice to have you on here.
Geez, I mean, with that diverse, all those different kind of avenues, it goes to show why, like, real estate is one of the biggest markets in all of Canada now. With selling them, buying them, staging them, getting them full of stuff, doing stuff to them. Like it just never seems to end.
Building them up into fourplexes or tearing them down and starting from scratch. Jordan, I'm sure being a real estate agent here in Windsor, you've dealt with it all.
Yep. I've done it myself. I've helped a bunch of my clients do it. It's very interesting, actually, when you bring up the word fourplex, because, of course, the city of Windsor decided to turn down the $70 million because they could change the zoning bylaw. We'll see how that all plays out in time, but that's just a quick side note there.
Oh, absolutely. I was a little confused by that one myself. We have about 8,000 people looking for homes in the Windsor area, and more coming in with the new development of the EV battery plant and all the other factories that are looking at coming here, as well as Amazon, and we have a ton of stuff going on here. Windsor is, I'm going to say it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, one of the hottest real estate markets in Ontario for sure. I don't know if it's in all of Canada, but it's certainly a hot market.
Yeah, the market's definitely moving because the inventory issues are where you're going to find the prices are going to be a bit more static because you have to rely on the lenders to come up with a way to get people more money, right? Because that's the game that's changed, right? At 2%, you can borrow X. At 6%, you can borrow Y, and that's just where a lot of the market moved as far as the financing goes. But the number of people who still want to get into home ownership or in the move up, the move down, and what they're trying to do with their life hasn't really changed. It's just the ability to do it. Or again, if a few years ago your property was worth 700 and today it's worth, call it 500, it's a different equity position. So the different retirement strategies and different things people were looking at doing, a lot of that all changed fairly drastically. Most of it driven by the rate increases. But again, we're still seeing quite a bit of movement in the market due to the fact that we're still in an inventory shortage. So
now with Windsor being a hot market, and I can only, Sean and I have talked about this, where you're only going to see this area becoming hotter. When do the interest rates, of course, went from super low, like 2% or less, up to, I think with the testing for the governments now, it was like a 7% for the test rates. I think somewhere around there.
A little higher, because it was basically at one point, I think it was as high as 8.5%, because it's 2% above the rate that you're quoting. From my understanding, we can ask Sean; he would know a little more specifically. And then
Correct.
What they would do is they would the little trick. I don't know if you should say it, but of course the variable rate, which would have of course been lower at times because it uses a different way of approving people. There were some things that could be done to help support people in different situations. I know Sean's very good at helping people in their, problem solve their way through those transactions. So,
but
so to give some clarification, yes, it was called the benchmark rate. So what they originally started it out with was it was either one of two metrics. It's either 5.25% or it's whatever the contract rate that you're being offered plus 2%, whichever one's higher. And so when we had interest rates at 2%, 2 plus 2, 4, 5.25 is what everybody was kind of qualifying at. But as the rates have kind of moved up now, that, you're adding 2% onto, let's say, 4.8. Well, now you're qualifying at 6.8. That's kind of what we've seen transpire. And if you're qualifying on a variable rate, there's a lot of variable rates, prime minus 0.9, prime minus 1. So you're talking 6.2. Now you're qualifying at 8.2. So it is still happening.
So when are we looking at, Jordan, in your estimation, when are we looking at a drop in this rate? Is it going to be summer? Is it going to be fall? Is it going to be next spring?
So I went to
Loaded question.
Well, I went to the RBC Economics, and before that happened, I had pegged actually that April, so the April one coming up would actually be the first time they truly look at moving it down. I had no expectation that it would go up, but that it would just hold. Now that's been pushed out. I would probably lend it to the September timeline, where we'll see it drop, and we'll probably lose about 1% by the year end, because I think they'll do a quarter for the last part of the year there. And so when you see that, that'll spark people's interest in seeing that the rates are coming down. I think the first one will have the greatest impact on the market, though, because the moment it starts, right, the snowball starts rolling, it's only going to continue to pick up speed. And like I've mentioned earlier, we're not really having the number of people who would like to be in real estate down. It's the number of people that can actually be in the market. And again, with the fixed rates actually coming down a little bit, they're closer to 5 than to 6 now. So with that, we're starting to see the market pick up. We're starting to see the multiples reappear. We're starting to see the market start to climb. And so I think if you're looking at, like, we're in the spring market, so we're going to see the market do what it does in the spring market. It's a very consistent thing year in and year out, now that we're into what I would call more of a normalized market, out of the insanity market where every month it went up. Right. I think you're seeing now we have our peaks and our valleys throughout the year. There's times where there's more inventory, there's more traction, there's more buyers. And it's usually once, now that it's going to be light till 7 o'clock tonight or 8 o'clock tonight instead of light till 4:30 in the afternoon, it's a little easier to help people buy and sell homes when they can actually see them in daylight. So there's other factors that do build into what causes that to happen. Again, winter and snow versus, nobody really wants to go out in the middle of August either. When you walk outside and you're drenched, nobody wants to go out when you're stepping out into a blizzard. Most people really like to buy and sell in the spring and the fall, are the two busiest markets in my experience.
So once the rates start coming down, even a little bit, as you said, the snowball is going to start to roll. There's a lot of people pent up, just kind of waiting for this. How quickly, in your estimation, do you think the insanity is going to start again? Is there going to be suddenly $50,000 overbids again, or is that something that's going to kind of, is that gone by the wayside?
It hasn't gone by the wayside. I think that's the misnomer. It's gone by the wayside pretty much once you clear about 700,000 in the market, but everything in the listed at 299, 399, 499, and 599 still a lot of times get pushed. Even 699 does. It's not to say over those numbers it doesn't happen, but if you're looking on the real estate market in Windsor Essex and you're looking at something at 649, there's a more likely chance that it's actually probably listed at what expectation is in the current market than that it's actually a bid price. Now, you can always reach out to a realtor and verify. But when you're looking at 299, almost always that's a bid price. At 399, almost always a bid price, meaning that they're going to hold offers for a week. You're going to be a part of the group there. And then you're seeing, there were 6 offers on a property the other day. I know it went up about 21 or 22,000. I know one that had 15 offers and it went up 135,000. So we're not seeing the same insanity where, I was in one last year where there ended up being, I think it was 26 offers and it went $225,000 over. But again, basically, when you look at it, the more offers there are, the likelihood the number gets pushed up, right? So 15 offers, 130, 6 offers, 30, 40 over, these are pretty consistent. But what we're seeing is that the buyers are still out there. They are back into the mode of bid and not really into the mode of looking at it as a list price. I've been in the business since 2008. So for most of the early part of my career, it was really hard to switch into this economy, right? To the list low, sell high, because forever it was like, okay, you want 500, let's list it at 499 or even 524.9, and we'll negotiate somewhere between 485 and probably 515, right? Like that's you're 10 up, 15 down,
right,
and
that was
whatever.
A normal market.
That was normal, and we got back a little bit towards that, but because I think we spent so much time, the culture changed in the buyer's profile that we could never really get all the way back. And so as soon as the rates kind of stabilize, we've been in I would call this a stable market for at least almost a year now. Where the market's really just the rates have relatively held. The market itself, price wise, is relatively held. Like a lot of the things have been in a stable mode. So right now we're seeing the everything shift back up. Right, we're already rising week over week again. As we head into the spring market, it's already starting to happen. So the rates don't have to necessarily come down. What I'm concerned with is what does that what's the amplification when they do, right? So does that then push the 30 to 130 out, and now we're back up to that 150 to 200 over again? Like what window
if
are we playing
if you're a young couple or a young buyer, is now the time to do it before the insanity rolls back in, or are you waiting for the lower rates?
Well, it's one of the things one of my buddies says all the time, and it's really smart. It's you date the rate. So if it's affordable today and you can manage the payment today, then I would recommend you get in today, because getting in tomorrow, rates will come down. But as we saw before, 2% adds almost $225,000 to the market. Well, if you're at 5%, let's say for 5 years, this simple math, and then all of a sudden in 5 years now it's at 3%, because we're probably not going to be back to 2 or 3.5. You get that savings, but today it's affordable at the 5%. It likely will still be affordable in the future. We're probably not going to see rates climb. Now, here's the thing. Nobody has a crystal ball. We always chat about, okay, could it go the other way? What could happen economically? But I would tell you the other thing for you, if you're a first-time home buyer and you can't find enough with yourself, find a business, like find a friend, find somebody else in your world that can come alongside you, and you guys can buy it together. Because once you're in equity, the benefit is you're in equity. When you're not, you're always chasing it.
There's more and more of that going on. I mean, I'm seeing companies now that are putting buyers together. They're actually putting buyers together as investments. They're putting buyers together, trying to match you up as living together, and owning a home, especially in markets. I mean, not so much in Windsor, but in markets like Vancouver, Toronto, and places like that.
Yep.
So I mean, it's definitely a different market than it was even 5 years ago.
Yes.
Now, Sean, from a mortgage side, what's the mortgage side of it going to be seeing like in the next 6 months to a year? Are there people? Are they going to the banks? Are they going to secondary lenders? I know that I was reading an article, and I'm sorry, I'm going to let you talk here, but I was just reading an article about how they have the highest number of homes going to be remortgaged, I think, ever.
Yeah, the stats are something like 40% of all mortgages right now are going to be due to renew here in the next 12 to 18 months. That's a staggering number, right? Now, some of them have already renewed. Mine personally, I've got 2 renewing in 2025. So those nice 2020 rates, yeah, they were advantageous. That was actually a little bit early, just kind of worked out that way, but still great rates. And yeah, when it comes up for renewal, it's going to really put a test on people's finances. I think many are going to have to refinance. Hopefully they've got the equity in their property that they can do that. And if not, they're just going to have to make ends meet, cut into their existing lifestyle to make it happen. Because again, nobody wants to lose their house. Nobody has any interest in defaulting on mortgage payments. So I don't think, you have to worry about like a crash situation, right? I know a lot of people have asked me, they're like, hey, how close is this to, what happened in 2008? Not even remotely, right? The system itself in Canada was built in a different fashion to prevent a circumstance like that. Right. And so I don't suspect you're going to be seeing that. Plus a lot of the wave behind it. Right. As Jordan was saying, we've still got record low numbers of homes being built relative to the amount of pressure that's being put on the system. They're simply not building them fast enough. At the same time, the rental market has gone. I can't speak I can't speak in all, kind of avenues. Housing. Yeah, exactly. Right. But I had 2 places in Calgary. We have one now. And, my rents were very, very reasonable. I had tenants that I absolutely trusted. They were phenomenal. So I was like, yeah, I don't need to raise the rent. And they loved it. And, translate to now, right? Those variable costs have kind of jumped up. And so we've had the conversation. Now, granted, we still took very good care of our tenants. She was awesome. And she said, yeah, no problem. Like, absolutely. We can totally talk about, renewing at a higher amount. And that's the thing, right? Is they're going to understand things. But in terms of the whole on the mortgage market itself, lots are going to be renewing. I don't see blood in the streets by any means.
Because that was one of the questions that I had from somebody we were talking the other day, and this sort of blends you and Jordan together, is if, suddenly my mortgage goes up $750 a month, right? Mm-hmm. And I can't afford that. Okay, I'm going to be, is there going to be a lot of houses coming on the market from that? Or is it just going to be, is that going to be a rare occurrence?
Well, so I'll speak to that because actually Sean was waiting the other day. We were going to have coffee, and there was a lady who literally had this exact question, and I ended up giving her my contact info anyway. But she literally goes like, my mortgage person gave a call, which is awesome because it doesn't renew till November, and she's like, expect my mortgage payment to double. And so she's like, how am I going to do that? Like, I'm going to have to send my son to work, and he has some anyway, the whole circumstance there. And I just went, okay, so if you want, I can give you my info, and what we can do is look at the options that exist. So whether that's bringing somebody into the home, whether that's spending some money to do a minor renovation to be able to bring a student in or do some different things around those ideas, right? Because if you think about it, if it's $700 or $800 a month, and this is what I'm talking to a lot of people about, is we're probably not going to be as able to live in our own little isolations like we like as North Americans. We have to probably take on some of the ideas of other cultures where they live in, more community style property. And so that's no different than the people buying their matchmaking and putting these people together. But even in your own home right now, international students, we have the college, we have the university locally. So you could possibly, get $600-700 a month from one of the rooms in your property if you do a little bit of renovation. And then you're able to, make sure that those things, now you're able to bring some money in. And somebody's like, yeah, but I don't want to have somebody else there. I said, well, your options are have somebody else there, get a second job, hopefully get the bank to buy down your rate using equity in your home, or sell. And I said, of all of those options, I would say sell is the most expensive. And as the realtor in the room, I don't ever pretend like it's a cheap thing to try to transact in real estate, because there is a lot of equity still in a lot of these homes, which is the good part. Like my sister, we were chatting and she's like, yeah, if I sell my house, I have 150 grand in my hand. It's like, okay, but then what do I do? Right. And if you think about rents and things that are at like $2,000 a month for a very similar property, well, that's $24,000 a year. That's only 6 years worth of payments that have no longer any equity position. So how do we as a culture, as a community, come together to really come with a new idea with really solid plans that yes, you're going to have to give up some of your personal space probably to make it work. But how many people are retired and they have their basements or they have bedrooms in their house that they're no longer using? And if they share them with students, they all of a sudden can keep their home, and maybe that's until the rates come down. So they only have to do it for a season. It's not permanent, right? And so again, finding that we have again, with the plants coming in, all things being built, we've got a lot of people, temporary workers. Like, again, you can kind of pick and choose around you who might be available to support you versus you having to go get a second job or come out of retirement or all those other things. But again, my theory in life is let's put every option on the table, see what options we have before the bank is saying, okay, here's renewal rate at 60 days out. It's like, oh crap, what do I do now? And I would tell anybody who's got a mortgage that is going to be coming up, the first call you should make is to your mortgage person. If you don't have one, call Sean. But you would want to reach out and you want to clarify and verify what expectations of the rate would be then. And again, in November, hopefully the rates will be at the 4.5%, which would be a lot less strenuous than at 5.5%, right?
Well, now in your estimation, and I'm just asking your opinion for those listening. This is nothing. It's not official. Nothing.
Disclaimer.
Stone. Disclaimer. You got it.
Speak freely.
What is the lowest you think we're going to see in rates again? And we're never going to see 2% again.
Oh, I actually think we might. But
Really?
If you're asking the lowest, I think we'll see within the next 3 to 6 months, the lowest rates will probably be right around 4. I think that'll be fixed rate. I think the variable rate, the lowest it gets within the next 2 years, is probably going to be right around 4 as well. With the discount, maybe as low as if you have the 9.5 or 1 point off, you might get as low as 3, but it's probably about 3.5. So again, I think if you're budgeting, I think you'll be able to get hopefully the rate down by about 2.25% from where it is now on the variable. And similarly, you'll see the fixed rate and the variable rate kind of do their normal thing, which is the variable rate is lower than the fixed rate, right? And so right now that's in inversed. And so that's a very temporary thing, no different than the bond market flipping on top of its head for a minute. Like so much happened recently that just, it doesn't play by the normal rules, but the normal rules do come back into sway. And that's where people forget. It's like, this has happened before, and this is what happened after. So if we just reread the story from the 80s, the 70s, the 90s, like this story gets retold and different things happen, different reasons for it. But at the end, the way the market and people move is always back towards that ground. So my opinion is, if you're looking forward to 2026, 2027, we'll be in that 4% interest rate to 3.5, depending on where you go and what you're looking for. Because I don't think we're going to get back down to 2 unless the economics, we have things that come up there. I think that was a once in a lifetime possible opportunity, but there's a chance because I think that lenders If you want to spur government, you want to spur building, you want to spur us back into action around actually creating enough affordable housing, I think the percentages being lower will be helpful as long as they're accommodated around affordable housing. I think if you had a government plan around it where they were able to get lower financing by buying like this government, prescribed thing, and you were able to do it that way so that new homeowners are getting in and being able to get into equity versus the other way. There's got to be ways with CMHC and other things we can do.
But speaking of that, the government is currently, and I say currently, killing the first-time buyer program.
Yeah.
So that is, going to be gone. So, I mean, it doesn't look like, at least at the moment, that they're really trying to spur too much in that area. When new buyers are trying to get in, and it's always a question. I talk to a lot of young people, and truthfully, it's scary for them. They come out of university with a $60,000 student loan. They got to have a car. They got $2,000 for an apartment. They've got, all the other stuff. I mean, this is the lowest income they're probably ever going to make in their life, doing what they're doing. And yet they've got all these bills, and then taking some of the programs like that away, where it now says, okay, you've got to come up with, you want to buy an $800,000 home and you got to come up with $80,000 while you're paying all this other stuff off. Is there any hope for the young ones? Is there any tricks, tips, anything that either one of you guys have for these poor people out there who are trying to get into this great market and the door seems to be slamming in their face?
You want to take it first?
So there's, and I'm not even going to take credit for this, but there's a gentleman that I follow out of London. He does a weekly Wednesday money show. His name's Mike Rosehart, and the guy delivers tons and tons and tons of content. And he always signs off his show with the same kind of mantra, slogan, whatever you want to call it. But he says, the three things that you need to do to get to a position of financial independence, right? And everybody's going to measure differently, but spend less, earn more, maximize returns. And, how can people get, how are the young ones going to make it? By doing exactly those things. You're going to spend less, you're going to save more, and maximize your returns. And that's all that they really can do. And, everybody would love to have, a brand new car and brand new shoes and this and that. But, realistically, and there's another thing that he talks about is the work has to happen first before the rewards of what you get from working, right?
And I don't mean to insult the young ones nowadays, but the mindset seems to be different. It seems to be, I want all the big stuff now, Well, and it's like, well, they want all they want the $500 Jordans and all that other stuff, but they also want to get into the market.
Yep, and that's the thing, right? And so sometimes you have to have hard conversations with people. Certainly when they're coming from a position of like, hey, I want to get a house, and I don't know how, and I need your advice, Mr. or Mrs. Professional. Mm-hmm. Well, again, right, there's going to be pleasantries and this and that, but ultimately, eventually, we have to be dead honest if they're in a situation that's, very dire. Some of them are coming out and they've got a little bit of student loan debt, they've got extremely high work ethic, and they just graduated with a phenomenal program in engineering or something like that. And they're, kind of looking down the ticket at, I can go work in the US, at one of the manufacturers right there in Detroit and make $125,000 a year, in the next 6 to 12 months. Mm-hmm. That's pretty good, right? Because credit we can work with. Down payment, there's varying sources, but your income, that's only on you. That's all, my hands are tied, right? And so some of them are coming out with those kind of good attributes out of school, but those that don't, and they're saying like, hey, I need a solution. Well, you have to have the hard conversation. It's like, listen, this is what you need to do. And if you don't want to, that's okay. Or you don't think you can, okay. We can keep in touch and work towards the final goal. But as of right now, like there's nothing that really can be done. We can't magic wand it. There's no solution here unless you're willing to X, whatever it is.
The response. So one of the things I look at, and it's the immigrant mindset. And the mindset is that things are not more important than the future. And so what's really interesting is I have friends who, of course, are first-time immigrants to this country. And then I, of course, have parents parents who are first-time immigrants raising their children. There's a different mindset I find within that culture than there is from me, who is like 5th generation Canadian, right? Like we've just been here a long time, and it's not necessarily negative, but we want to play by the rules that have always existed, but the rules of the game are changing. If I were raising my kids under the same mantra, which was get a really good job, don't worry, everything will be fine, the policies and programs in place will sustain you. That does not seem to be the truth in the current economy. And so what they're saying is be highly creative, come up with ideas. That doesn't mean don't go get a real job, but it does mean if you're going to do that, you might want to look at opportunities to find other ways, like you said, to get returns, to get the money that you're earning. So don't buy the Jordans. Put money into an investment that earns the return to buy the Jordans, right? Like the asset mentality versus the thing mentality. And so when I look at young people, like my son just turned 18 literally a week ago, and he door knocks and he starts his own little business, and he's going to be able to grow that. Now that he's 18, he can actually open up a corporation. He can do some things that he couldn't before. And so what's really cool for that is to see him door knocking and doing the labored work and doing some of the hard stuff. But it's still, if he goes to a bank and says, hey, I've made $150,000 and I'm 18, can I buy a house? They're going to say no. You know why? Because it's 1 year. Now, if you had a job, like you mentioned, go to 4 years, get this job, work at it for 6 to 9 months, then finally you're in that spot. But my son, after 2 years, if he hustles and he does some of these things and he wants to work hard and build a solid business, he'll be able to become, liked by the bank. But the other thing is, if he has 5 of his buddies all doing the same thing, and they look at it and go, okay, so now I've made 50 grand, they made 50 grand, 50 grand, 50 grand, 50 grand. There's $250,000 worth of income. And they come to Sean and say, hey, want to buy our first rental together, right? Live in my parents' basement, like still stay at home. You don't need to leave. Your parents are hoping that when most people, they want their kids to get ahead. They're willing to sacrifice and keep them living with them either way. So might as well.
The average nowadays, I just read the other day on that, is the average is now between 28 and 32 by the time kids are leaving home.
Yeah, and I think that has a lot to do. I think that has more to do with the culture of what we've done around marriage and a lot of the things on that side, the actual moral reality of how we've operated in the world over the last 10 to 15 years. That's pushing those ages out, because again, when you think dual income, right? And this is why we're bringing it up now. Do this with your friends. But a lot of people used to get married in their 20s. Today, most people get married in their 30s. They don't get married, or they don't get married at all. And so it takes them a while to be common law and different rules and regs that show up there. I think there's more than just the simple things. And that's why I say get in a group with friends that you can be in equity with. You guys could even live in it or rent it or whatever you need to do to make that work. And that's similar to pairing up in marriage, right? When you were young, you got a partner not only who would help you with your family and you'd support each other, but you also had 2 incomes a lot of the time in the current economy. And so that, of course, when you both come together and you make 60 and she makes 60, you make 120 versus you trying to make 60 and can't buy anything, and you're in it together, right? There's this, you're both working towards the same outcome goal. And I think that's where we got to find a way to help teach this generation, find friends, find your group, find your niche, find these people who are of similar mindset and have a similar opportunity where they can help pool together to get in. And I've told people this, well, I don't want my daughter living on this area of the city. I'm like, cool. I wouldn't want my daughter living there either, but she can afford a rental there with her income without anybody else. Mom and dad might have to help or some other way to do some creative things for the down payment. But when you do those things, now she owns a piece of real estate that will likely transact for more money in 5 years than it didn't, right? The odds that the property is not worth more in 5 years is almost impossible.
I really like the concept of teaching the younger generation to get in with their friends and stuff like that. Going to the bank of mom and dad is easy, okay, if they can afford it.
Of course.
But some can't and still want to help. And I know that there's some who are looking to save for retirement and heading towards that direction, and offering to assist the kids. And usually the amounts are not small. Puts a dent in their potential to retire at a certain age and everything else. So the idea of teaching the younger generation, to band together with other basically young investors, and go in that direction. I think that's definitely a direction that I think the schools don't really work with that. They don't teach that kind of mindset, neither in high school or unless you're in economics, not even the universities or colleges really teach that. And I think that's something that we definitely have to, as a society, work more towards, because yes, the realities we're not going backwards now.
Right.
Things are going to, if not get slightly better, it wouldn't take much to push it back slightly worse either. So we really have to have that mindset of how can we get through this. And I really appreciate, that particular opinion from you, because that's my view as well.
Well, as an investor, I use joint venture agreements. And for anyone out there that doesn't know what that means, that just means that there's one person on title and somebody else ventured with you. And so if you're looking, again, you'd be doing a joint venture possibly with your friends, but a lot of times they're all going to be on title. So you have joint ownership. But there's also the ability to use other people's money in this business. And Sean, of course, and myself and others who all know there's a game outside of the game. And so you can go look to find these men and women who are looking for young people who they've got their money. You mentioned it, like they're kind of looking at their retirement, but if they could invest with you for 5 years, then your plan is to pay them out and they'll grow their equity and they know they're in the equity game. That's not a bad way to help, get started, because again, you're like, well, where do I come up with it? You mentioned it. Where do I come up with 80 grand to buy my house?
Yeah.
Talk. It can be your parents, but you can also look at other you won't necessarily be able to go with A lenders, but B lenders who will allow you to use a second from somebody else as a JV agreement under an equity position instead of a lending position. There's all kinds of creative ideas. And this is where I think, again, masterminding with young people, getting young people interested in money, because money is a resource. The one thing I've realized is money has no real value other than its utility, meaning what can I use this for? And instead of using it for my Jordans, my iPhone, my things, I'm going to use it for my assets. And I've told people now, I'm like, as a realtor, I get it. Entering into real estate isn't the first place I'd recommend now. The first place I'd recommend is if you have $500, put it in something that pays you dividends. It's just, it makes sense to me that now that you have a cash flow asset of some sort that can either rebuy and then grow that to the point, then you have a down payment. And at that point, yes, I recommend real estate. Why? I know it really well and it's cash flow and now you have equity. But again, I look at these things as when we forget that you can invest $25 and then $25. It doesn't need to be these big extravagant numbers. I think we make the mistake. Well, I can invest. I don't have any money. Well, do you have $10? Right? Like you can start somewhere, putting it into an account, getting somebody to come alongside you and just start doing it instead of waiting until one day you're like, oh, I finally saved up 25 grand. It's like, but what did the money do the whole time? Oh, it's sat in a savings account making 2%. It's like, well, that was dumb. Right. And again, hire professionals. I'm not saying do this on your own. Hire professionals, talk to really smart people who do these things and understand them better than I do. I just know if I were to rewind as a young person, instead of trying to wait for what I could afford, go find the things you can now invest in with those funds and start to invest there. And then if you want to be a real estate investor, build those funds to the point where they're real estate capacity, or find, like I said, a joint venture partner.
Well, that is a huge topic I'd love to talk about. And so we're going to have you back, and focus on that, because there's a lot of great information there for the listeners. And I really think that's something that people need to hear more of. Now, I know in the city, you're very active. You're active with your clients. You're active in the community. I know that you've got an event coming up. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So on April 4th, from 7 to 9 p.m., we're going to have this awesome event. We've got Mayor Sherry Bondi coming into town to speak to us about how in the community, she's trying to find ways, of course, around affordable housing. She's trying to speak with the community about, okay, how do we work together? Not how do we work against each other? How do we grow, whether that's through the ADU programs that are available. Windsor's really good at it. And then she's, of course, the Essex mayor. It's really awesome. And then we've got my friend, Matt from RBC coming in to really just speak about mortgages, to come and give us like the economic update, kind of like we're doing here on the podcast, just an idea there. And then of course you get me, the realtor, who's just looking at, okay, so with what Sherry's trying to do, with what Matt and, Sean and others are trying to do, how do we as a community come together to build these relationships, build these networks of human beings and support each other, right? Because here's the thing, I may not have all the answers, but maybe you do, or maybe you do. And maybe your idea will spark a response in my brain that's like, oh, this thing. And so these events, it's designed to be probably about 45 minutes worth of head talking. And then the rest of it is designed to actually ask questions and try to get to some of the root causes of where people are stuck and how we can best support them. So the event again is April 4th from 7 to 9. And we'd love to have you guys out. If you guys wouldn't mind posting the link below, we do have a
Absolutely.
link, of course, to book and get your tickets. Hopefully, it's going to book out. It's going to be held at 3070 Jefferson, which is just off the expressway here in the city of Windsor. So it'll be a great event.
No, I think there's a lot of knowledge that's going to be at that event. So we'll definitely be posting it and sharing that. Absolutely.
Beauty.
Well, I'd just like to thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Great information, and more to be had. And of course, Sean is just a a fountain of information on his end for the mortgage side. So, we're going to be talking a little bit more about that on future podcasts. But again, thank you for coming out today. It's been wonderful. And we look forward to, having you back on again and talking more about the young generation and see how we can, help them a little bit.
Awesome.
And otherwise, this is The Real Connection with Dave McCall, Sean Santoro, and we will be back on. It's a weekly show now, so we'll be back on next week. Look for us at www.therealconnection.com. We're going to be on YouTube. We're going to be on Instagram and Twitter and all the big social media sites. So for the listeners and viewers, you'll be able to find us everywhere. We're going to be on 18 podcast channels, Spotify, Amazon, all the big guys. So we will be everywhere, and we will be definitely talking to Jordan Moore.